German or Turkish? Footballer Mesut Ozil's resignation from the German national team has triggered a debate on racism and integration. So how will Germany's and Europe's multicultural societies deal with the issue? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Peter Dobbie. Racism and disrespect. Those were the reasons Mesut Ozil gave for quitting the German national team after being blamed for Germany's shock defeat in the first round of this year's World Cup. He created a media storm after having his picture taken with the Turkish president Recep Tayyip Erdogan in May. Critics began to question his loyalty and they accused him of loving Turkey more than Germany. Ozil was born in Germany to a Turkish family. The German Football Association has rejected Ozil's claim of racism. They did, however, concede they could have done more to protect him. We'll be discussing those issues with our panel in a moment, but first, Dominic Kane sets up today's discussion from Berlin.
His international career is over. Now club duties with Arsenal have taken Mesut Ozil to the Far East. But in his absence, the fallout from his retirement is reverberating around Germany. The newspapers have seized on his statement in which he pointed the finger at the German Football Association, specifically at its president, Reinhard Grindel, accusing him of having a racially discriminative background. Ozil has been in the spotlight for his off-the-field actions since this moment, posing with the Turkish president, both alone and with other German players who have Turkish roots. Recep Tayyip Erdogan is a divisive figure in Germany, as are the policies of his government. But in the Turkish community in Berlin, even among those who oppose Erdogan, many support Ozil.
Fighting racism begins with showing people where the limits are. We've had enough. Someone needs to say that to the German Football Federation, that all players with non-German backgrounds are welcome, and we will make sure that you feel well in Germany. If you have a second or third home, that's okay, but you're here and you're a part of our society.
Some in the football world here remember what happened after France won the World Cup in 1998, how that multicultural team acted as a catalyst for the then German hierarchy to change its thinking.
First of all, they tried more integration, they tried to build up more schools, and as you see, it worked with the U21 in 2009 and with the team in 2014 in Brazil. If there is success, nobody discusses where they come from.
And yet, after this summer's French victory in Russia, some did highlight the racial background of that team, with one comedian describing the victory as Africa winning the World Cup, something French officials angrily dismissed, saying there is no hyphen in people's nationality. They are French and only French. Here in Berlin, Mesut Ozil does have one very powerful ally. Angela Merkel says she values him as a great footballer who did a lot for the national team. And in his career, he wore the national jersey 92 times, scoring 23 goals and helping his team to win the World Cup. But now he says the levels of racism and disrespect he's received mean he will never wear this again. Dominic Kane, Al Jazeera, Berlin.
Okay, let's bring in our guest. Joining us today here on Inside Story from Ankara, Yusuf Kanli, a Turkish journalist and formerly the editor of the Hurriyet Daily News. Out of Berlin, we'll be talking to Erich Laaser, football commentator and a radio host. And in Brussels, Julien Duez, French sports journalist and writer. Welcome to you all, gentlemen. Yusuf Kanli in Ankara first. Is he German or is he Turkish?
Of course, he's a Turkish German. Like me, I'm a Turkish Cypriot. No one can deny my Cypriotness or my Turkishness. And Mesut Ozil is a German of Turkish origin, and he is proud of being Turk and being a German. And that's what he has been saying all along anyhow. Therefore, thinking that he is either, or ignoring his Turkish background, or denying his German identity, would of course be a racist approach to the issue. And that's why he was very furious with the treatment he received. When he was successful, he was a German. When he was unsuccessful, he was a Turk. That's, of course, unacceptable.
Erich Laaser in Berlin, can he really be both?
Well, officially he is a German citizen. He has played for the German national team and the U21 national team. And his roots, of course, his parents and all his ancestors, they are Turkish. And for sure, he was raised in Gelsenkirchen, where many people from Turkey are staying and living. And I guess when he was a young guy, he was talking more Turkish than a German language.
Julien Duez in Brussels, Player of the Year 5 times. How do you go from being so incredibly naturally successful on the pitch to saying, I've had enough, I can't do this?
Well, in the end, I think the political side of this affair has made him say he can't do it anymore, because, you know, a footballer is also a human being, and Mesut Ozil, as a man of two cultures, can't understand why he's been such criticized by representing his roots, and in the end he can't do his job anymore in proper conditions.
Yusuf in Ankara, what does this say about football in Germany, or perhaps about people who would describe themselves as being football fans in Germany?
Of course, Turks were proud of seeing Özil in the German National League, national team, or his success. His reports that Arsenal would hire him, I mean, it's big news in Turkey nowadays as well. The sports is sports, and soccer is very important in Turkey as well as it is in any other part of the world. And Özil, you know, at his hometown, a street was named after him, and now they are changing the photograph of him there. Previously it was Özil in German national team suit, and now one shaking hands with Erdogan. It's of course important. He's a public figure. But if you allow me, I mean, a footballer posing with a political figure might not be the best thing to do. But criticizing him for that, or accusing of him being more Turk or whatever, I can understand, or discriminating him because of that, is equally bad.
Erich Laaser, footballers pose with politicians all the time. We saw the French president, Emmanuel Macron, wrapping himself up in the flag when his team did very, very, very well at the World Cup. This comes down to, at some level, surely, the nature of Mr. Erdogan, because that's why the racist comments were made, because it was a reaction to Mr. Erdogan's tough guy image.
I mean, everybody knew when Erdogan and Özil took this picture together that a couple of weeks after that, in Turkey, they had elections. Erdogan knew it, and I'm quite sure that Mesut Ozil knew that also. I will not blame him for that, because his roots are Turkish, no doubt about it, but I will blame his advisors. They took advantage of him for many years now. They achieved his bank account, and their own, of course, but this advice they gave him to pose with Erdogan for this pic was wrong.
Julien Duez in Brussels, are there bigger social issues in play here? Dominic Kane, our Berlin correspondent there, was talking about the argument that's arisen between France and a cable news network anchor who was talking about the World Cup having been won by, quotes, Africa. And then you get into that whole territory of ownership, who owns it, where do people come from, etc. And then that plays into the multicultural debate.
Well, the situation is kind of complicated in France, because if you take the victory at the World Cup 20 years ago, the players were taken as example for multiculturality, and they were given a role that isn't their role. Their role is actually to play football on the pitch. And 20 years later, the players just wanted to represent France. They all saw themselves as French players. For example, if you take the defender Benjamin Mendy, he answered to a tweet who tried to show all the origins of the French players by responding with 23 French flags, showing that all the players see themselves as French. And so it's not really understandable in France that abroad some people, no matter they are people from the street or anchormen, talk about the victory of the African team. Also because in France, this debate is historically extreme right-wing debate. When you speak about the African origins of some players, you enter the extreme right-wing game, and this is something we don't want to do anymore, because it would actually just ruin the joy of winning the World Cup.
Erich Laaser, what's your reading of how the German FA, the DFB, handled this? Because they at one point said, we need an explanation. They already had an explanation, but it didn't seem to get any traction with them.
Well, the DFB has made the mistake just before the World Cup did start. After these pictures were published with Erdogan, Ozil and Gundogan, do not forget the other guy, there was a press meeting in preparation of the World Cup, and they asked Gundogan to talk to the press people of Germany, and he did it. And nevertheless, in the first match after that, the people in the stadium, they were shouting on Gundogan, and they didn't like his appearance now for Germany. Ozil didn't talk to the press, he didn't talk at all until last Sunday, and that was a big mistake. The DFB should have forced him to give at least a small statement why he has done this picture at this point of the year with Mr. Erdogan. So they missed it, and now they belong to the group of the losers.
OK, let's pause for a second and take a closer look at how prevalent racism is in football. In June, after Sweden's defeat at the World Cup, Swedish player Jimmy Durmaz was criticised for his performance and racially abused on social media. Earlier this year, Belgian Michy Batshuayi, who was playing for the German club Borussia Dortmund during a Europa League game in Italy, was subjected to racist monkey chants from Atalanta fans. In January, Jefferson Lerma, the Colombian central midfielder who plays for Spain's Levante, says he was abused on the pitch by a Celta Vigo striker. And Leon Balogun and Anthony Uja, both players for local German teams, said they were abused by some fans during the warm-up before a domestic game. Yusuf Kanli in Ankara, how is this being not reported in Turkey? How is this being perceived in Turkey? Is there any question in Turkey that this is racism?
Yes, by and large, there is almost an agreement in all anti and pro-government circles in media, which is anti-government is getting less and less anyhow, that this is a racist move, and Ozil acted in a manner defending his national honor. This is the general perception. And as I said, his hometown replaced the photograph of him at a street they named after him, removed the Ozil's photograph with German colors, and instead put one with Erdogan shaking hands. This has become a national sentiment, but don't forget, this decision or this move came immediately after the NSU trial, where Germany, even the Chancellor Merkel admitted that there was a problem in Germany regarding treatment of the minorities or the foreigners.
Erich Laaser, if we just broaden this out for a second, we live in a time, particularly in the context of Europe, of identity politics. Do we now have to face up to a reality? We live in a time as well of identity sport, where people want to mislabel or relabel individual players and then say the worst things ever that you can say about somebody.
Well, I think we have the same opinion about upcoming racism and the strong right wings in almost every country in Europe. And Germany has the same problem. 10 years ago, when there were guys like Khedira, originally from Tunisia, or Ozil from Turkey, or Boateng, whose father is from Ghana, that was not a problem. you have idiots in the stadium everywhere. When they see dark guys and they do not belong to their own team, they shout on them and they do this monkey sound and something like that. But it's getting stronger now, as in general in the society, racism and the Red Wing are getting stronger everywhere.
Julien Duez in Brussels. Why is football getting more and more, therefore, politicised? Is it just that it's so incredibly popular and you've got that blend now of lots of money and lots of good players, you know, finding their way around the world because they say come to Europe on a good deal. They get the passport, but they don't deserve what this individual was on the receiving end of?
That's actually a good question because it's quite paradoxal. If you take the ultras in the stands, they claim for non-political football. And as the clubs has become multinational companies, they also don't want football to be involved with politics, either with like universal values like fighting homophobia, fighting racism, fighting anti-Semitism. But the thing is, the players have become merchandise products, and they tend to become more and more neutral. And the fact that some political incidents occur at that time might reassure us that they are still humans and that football is still a human game. And no matter how much money is involved, you cannot take the feelings out of a human being, and you cannot, also take off the fight he wants to make in order to represent his roots or to represent his personality. And that's the same for everyone which is involved in football.
Erich Laaser, there has been a long ongoing campaign, kick racism out of football. That's been there for, what, 10, 15 years now. If you're right, and there's more racism in the game, do we need to go back to basics on this? Because clearly the Get Racism Out of the Game campaign, it's not working.
Well, if you think of the World Cup in Russia, many people before the World Cup, they said, oh, Russia, they have problems with homophobia and something like that. They don't like black people. We didn't see that during the World Cup. So you can't say it was not successful. But in many cities where you have social problems, I mean, Paris is a good example. Berlin is another example. In many cities like that, the people go to the stadium and they want to live out their emotions. And if they read every day in the newspapers or watch television and they get anxious about foreign people, they let their emotions out then in the stadium. And that's how racism works in the brains of the people.
Yusuf, in Ankara, is that how politics works in the brains of the people? To pick up that phrase there from Erich, where you are, because if one has engaged at all when Besiktas play Galatasaray, that's not football. Okay, there's a game going on the pitch, but it's also tribalism, it's about loyalty, it's about politics, and it's always a dog whistle match.
Unfortunately, that's the reality of life. I mean, belonging or the identity of the people. I mean, how can you deny it? Or how can he deny it? If a president of a country invites you for a cup of tea in London, how can you say no? If you are offered a photo opportunity with the president, how can you say no? Whether you like it or not, it's difficult to say no. Particularly for an apolitical soccer player. How can he say no? Or if he is pro-Erdogan person, how can he say no? Because politics and sports, as you have rightly said, are interrelated, and politicians are very much aware of the importance of football in everyday life, and they exploit it to the maximum to get a few more votes. And indeed, the whole affair around Ozil is Erdogan's push for some more publicity to get away with the embargoes imposed on him in European arenas during the campaign. And indeed, the whole affair around Ozil is Erdogan's push for some more publicity to get away with the embargoes imposed on him in European arenas during the campaign. And indeed, the whole affair around Ozil is Erdogan's push for some more publicity to get away with the embargoes imposed on him in European And he tried to reach as much people as possible through such photographs and such deals. I may dislike it, yes, but it's one tactical politics to exploit everything possible or to use whatever platform you have to pass on the message.
Erich, we should perhaps, just for the sake of clarity, restate what he said when this whole controversy blew up and he was on the receiving end of this racist abuse on various social media platforms. He said, look, I went along out of respect for the office of the presidency, not necessarily for the president himself. He didn't go there out of respect or political support for Erdogan. His line is, it was for the seal of the office. Erich, if the German FA is to do something more to get round this issue or to destroy this issue, because there is clearly there are clearly questions to be asked here, what can it do? And would the German FA take him back?
No, for sure not. And I don't agree with the official opinion of Mesut. I mean, he knew Erdogan. He knew about the elections coming up in Turkey. And he knew, of course, that this picture would be a public relation for Mr. Erdogan. So never talk just about the president. We are talking about the President Erdogan. And Özil knew also that in Germany many people don't like Mr. Erdogan and his politics. He was talking about bringing Turkey closer to Europe. In fact, he did just the opposite thing. So to the causa Özil, I think he's gone. He's gone for Germany now. He's gone for the national team, and there will no comeback ever be.
Julien Duez, he'll never make a comeback. Will world football come back from this, or is world football heading into a dark time when it comes to those relationships between individual players, the relationships between individual countries?
Well, I think it's just the beginning of a long story which never going to end, actually. It's not the first case, won't be the last one. And you have to make a difference between club football and national team football, which are two very different things. I mean, in the first case, no matter where you come from, no matter what you represent, as long as you play correctly on the pitch for the club. When it comes to the national team, well, some players will always have a double identity, and it always depends of the people who they represent. I mean, here in Western Europe, the fans are very attached to the shirt, to the crest, and they're very keen on when their representatives do play for their country, the country of the fans who cheer for them. And in that case, Mesut Ozil and many other players all over the world, we always have the right to have two identities, but they also have to understand that the fans don't understand when they give their heart, like Mesut Ozil said, to two countries, because for them there is only one team, one shirt, one nation.
Okay, we will have to leave it there, gentlemen. Thank you very much. Thanks to our guests, Yusuf, Kanli, Erich, Laaser and Julien Duez. And thank you to you too for your company in the last half hour. You can see the show again anytime by going to the website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story, or you can tweet me. I'll tweet you back. I'm @PeterDobbie1. From me, Peter Dobbie, and the team here in Doha, thanks for watching. We'll do it at the same time again tomorrow. Bye.